everybody. Welcome to the latest edition of MSP Business School. I'm Brian Doyle, and with me here today, as always, I've got Rob Rogers and Tim McNeil. How are you guys doing today?
Doing well, sir.
Doing well. Beautiful. Beautiful. It's another beautiful day in paradise, and I mean that sincerely today.
That's right. That's right.
And I'm excited by our guest that we have with us today. Today we've got Gary Jones from VCPI, and I want to share a little bit about Gary's backstory. So one, thank you for being a VCIO Toolbox customer, of course, Gary. But more importantly, I think he's got a great story to tell about the type of MSP he is. His organization has found their niche within the world and really gone strong in verticalizing, specifically looking at long-term post-acute healthcare. So I guess if you'd say really narrowing down and getting specific, the old narrow and deep concept, you guys have found it. But even more than that, what I've come to realize in my time of getting to know their organization is they're a really innovative group too, with a big focus on automation. And I think Gary's going to share with us a lot of things about automation that many of us in the MSP world have never really thought about before. So with that, I'd like to say welcome, Gary. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Looking forward to the conversation.
Welcome.
Yeah. So we always love to get this started, Gary, with just kind of really understanding a little bit more about your backstory and how you came to be with VCPI and getting things started and rolled out for your organization.
Yeah, for sure. So a little bit of background about me. I've studied biology in college and went on to really have a focus in healthcare, but I've always been, a tech junkie. So I knew kind of when I would hit my career stride, it was going to be something along the lines of healthcare technology. And I worked for a large healthcare provider in the Western New York area. And then I made a transition to actually work with folks within the post-acute healthcare world, working for a technology company that specializes in emergency solutions for healthcare organizations, for acute care, for senior living, for skilled nursing, et cetera. And then just about 2 years ago, I made the transition over to VCPI, which is a managed service provider based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And we focus specifically on, like Brian mentioned, the long-term post-acute healthcare vertical. So that's really our niche and our focus. And when I came on board, I was in a sales leadership role and then transitioned to the general manager position. And I essentially oversee, that part of our business, the whole P&L for what we do for managed services for senior living and skilled nursing providers. So it's a really, energetic, exciting organization. And, some of the stuff that we've done over the last couple of years to really spearhead what our, I would say, future strategic plans and visions are around, automation are a critical component to some of the stuff that we have focused on.
Yeah, and as I've come to know you, Gary, what I've come to realize is you've kind of taken a little bit different approach than the average MSP to approaching this space. One, I think you were an early adopter in the MSP space, but I know this platform's growing, service now as your back end. And just that, it's always been a little bit more mature than we've seen in some other MSP spaces. Maybe talk a little bit about how you arrived at that and what some of the things that drove you to that, because I'm sure that'll lead us into the automation conversation a little bit as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think that where it makes sense to probably start is, how our organization came about, because I think that dictated all the things that we put into place and the decisions that the organization has made over the last, 5 to 10 years. So VCPI started as essentially a spin-off company at the time was the largest skilled nursing provider in North America, company called Extendicare. They owned and operated about 300 skilled nursing facilities, and they saw an opportunity to spin off this business called VCPI that would provide IT services not only for that company Extendicare, but for other providers, because 20 years ago, no one was doing anything around IT and no one had any, wherewithal to figure out, how do we host applications? How do we, do electronic health records? So there was a real opportunity for, an IT provider to come into the space and begin providing some support. So that's kind of how we started about 20 years ago. And then over the course of the years, because we came from the large provider, other large providers looked at us and looked to us to provide some services, whether it was related to, full scale managed services, managed cloud services, or even, client support services, just, thinking about service desk support. So that's kind of how we came about, and it's kind of how we grew. And that really led us to really look at what tool set we wanted to leverage to support, large organizations. So when you think of, large MSP, you're thinking of tool sets that are going to be capable for that organization to be able to support clients that are, up to even in some cases 10,000 users. So that's where our organization landed on some enterprise tools like ServiceNow to be able to work the ITSM side to be able to provide good quality services to our clients and their end users.
Now, do you find yourself usually intersecting with those companies more in a situation where they're pulling you in for just a portion of that IT support, or do you become their effective 100% outsourced help desk or service organization?
Yeah, it kind of varies. We kind of see an opportunity where for organizations that either own and or operate maybe somewhere between 5 to 50 communities or facilities, they really look to leverage a partner to do most of their full managed IT support. So oftentimes they don't have anyone internal that does any IT, and then sometimes they might have a small team, but usually that's our niche focus for the 5 to 50 facilities. When we start going above 50 is when we start looking at specific services, because as clients scale to that size, they begin to really grow their internal team, because they look at it as an opportunity to control costs and familiarize their own team with the organization. So for us, we look at maybe offering some things around automation as an opportunity, some things around just support desk, or some services just around managed cloud, and not necessarily taking the full IT approach. And then, as clients, we have clients that are, that operate hundreds of communities. And usually when we get to that scale, it's usually just around, service desk. So, looking at tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 support, depending on the needs of the client, because that's where it really makes sense for us to support them, because scaling that part of the business can oftentimes be not advantageous from the financial perspective.
And that makes sense. And certainly, what I think you're illustrating there too is there's a real huge opportunity when you start thinking about the mid-market play too, whether it's, long-term post-acute care or really anywhere, where if you're willing to come in a more co-managed situation and understand that you might not own 100% of the pie, sometimes it's a 50% of a pie that's 5 times the size of what you get at 100% too,
exactly.
right? When you start talking about 5 to 50 communities, my little chuckle to that is sometimes we're hearing MSPs talk about getting 5 to 50 desktops, right? So, definitely a different level of scale in that conversation. You've touched upon automation a couple of times. Tell us a little bit about how you, where you find yourself kind of innovating automation, and what are the kinds of things that you're trying to automate for these healthcare providers?
Yeah, so I think oftentimes for like maybe smaller MSPs or even mom and pops, I think in some cases, not in all, sometimes they don't even operate a service desk that's 24/7. Obviously, for us, we're working in healthcare, so we operate a 24/7, 365 service desk. So we're supporting clients, all day, all night across the board with live agents based in the US, which I think for us is a little bit different. But at the end of the day, I think that that's a critical thing for us in looking at how we want to provide some automation, because when we look at providing support all day, every day, we start to look at data, and we start to see that there's opportunities when we're analyzing the data where some of the work that we're seeing or that we're doing that's a bit more repetitive, we can begin to scale that in a way that makes sense for us and it makes sense for their teams and their end users. Because at the end of the day, when we're looking at the healthcare space, the last thing a team member or an end user of in a community wants to be doing is spending time on a phone talking to someone to do something like getting a password reset. Their job is to focus on providing care for people. So when we look at that, at these couple of things combined, we're looking at, okay, how can we speed up the process for someone to actually get this task completed, and what does that look like? So when we look at building some of these solutions, we saw, what are the things that people are calling us for the most? And it's typically password resets or password unlocks, or, even now what we're seeing a lot is MFA resets within 365. So we're looking at these things as like, okay, these are the heavy hitters for what our teams are really servicing on a regular basis. So is there an opportunity, and we found that there was, for us to actually build a solution to automate that work? And what that looks like for us is really providing solution via chat or phone system, via IVR, to be able to actually work through an automated process. And it's a really intelligent solution where we can actually cut down the amount of time that an end user is actually waiting on hold. So there is no hold time when we're going through automated solution. And, we typically see an average handle time in one of those calls, maybe between 6 and 8 minutes. So we can cut the hold time down completely, no hold time. And the handle time can range from between 1 to 3 minutes. So we're effectively decreasing that by 70%. And that's a huge opportunity for us to give to our clients so they can spend more time focusing on care versus spending time, sitting on the phone, talking with one of our agents to get a password reset or to get their MFA reset.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's totally interesting too, because when you start talking about 24/7 models, a lot of times when, the average MSP is supporting 24/7, it's because there might be a third shift manufacturing or something like that. But when you talk about the world of healthcare, that 24 hours really is 24 hours open. The events that happen at 8 o'clock in the morning are also going to happen at 3 o'clock in the morning, right? So when I'd have to assume you've got to provide the same level of care no matter what at all hours, but I have to assume, like most of us, it's probably a little bit harder to attract talent to shift number 3. So I got to assume that automation's even solving a problem for your MSP, where you can be a little skinnier in those second and third shifts just by the nature of how they hire, but not lose that service level with your customer.
Correct. Yep. And that's 100%, spot on is, we're looking at, how we can be more efficient. And honestly, what it looks like too, from our perspective, is a growth opportunity for folks that may have been on like a second or third shift to get on a first or second shift and start training them up for higher skill work. So maybe if they were, a tech 1 or like a tier 1 analyst on our third shift, maybe we could position them as a tier 2 on our second shift, as we can, look at opportunities for growth within our organization, because that's, I think, a really critical component for, our culture of our business is we want to promote within. And if we can do that by, leveraging people that typically were on a third shift and putting them on, a more attractive shift, and look at how we can grow them and develop them as a person. So
when you look at retention and culture, it's already tough enough sometimes to retain employees, right? And when you throw the third shift piece, now you're competing with just the opportunity to get a day job, even if it's not a good one, right? So, having a path like that, and, I know, Rob, you often like to talk about culture on these events. How do you build a culture with a 24/7 group as well, knowing the executive teams are really only on certain parts of those times? So I don't know, Gary, how you guys go about, really instilling a good culture in that process, day, night, and all that. Is that something you guys, really focus on as well?
Yeah, it is. And, I think for us, it's always being cognizant of all those shifts. So anytime we do, like a town hall, we're looking at providing that service for every shift. And for us, sometimes that means, staying late or, doing something overnight. But it's really important that everyone within the organization feels like they're getting the same out of, the company and out of leadership.
So how have you found it? Obviously with you, like you're based in Milwaukee, but you're in Rochester, right? So you obviously have people all over the place. How have you found COVID to affect or not affect what you all do?
Yeah, it's been, it's been different. But I would say, luckily as an MSP, when I think it was like March 13th of last year, I feel like I remember the day. I was actually on vacation with my wife, and we were on a leadership huddle, I think at like 6 or 7 p.m. because things were planning to get shut down and locked down. And we already had VPN access for all of our users. We had remote desktops available for everyone. So you basically made the pivot on Sunday night. Everyone's going to work from home. And when you're operating a service desk, that's a little bit more challenging, just to make sure that everyone has access to the tool set that they need. And there are some things that you lose not being on site. Obviously, those quick communications, and then some of our like business intelligence dashboards that we would have up in our service desk, like in that area, like you don't get that same access. But that's just where management has to step in and really, take a coordinated approach to make sure that that information is disseminated, communicated directly to our team members on a regular basis, because that's how we base some of our decisions off of. So all in all, we were able to make a pretty quick pivot. And I was mentioning to Brian just earlier that I think the only thing that's really changed is, and it's not really within our culture, I just think like from a societal perspective is, I think now that we're leveraging technology at our homes, sometimes it's hard for people to break away. And I see that Honestly, sometimes with myself, but also with clients, where I'm getting emails at 8:30, 9:30 p.m. because people have easier access to their computer and they can't just leave it behind. But I think that, and I'm hopeful that there will be, that paradigm shift, hopefully in the future where, we start to begin to separate those two things, business and pleasure, and not really be so tied to the work oftentimes, and just allow us to, take a break and spend time with family, because at the end of the day, we're all humans.
Well, I think look, I make it a point. I don't even check my email at night, and I recommend nobody does. Like, it's just like, you gotta, at what point, most people are still working from home. Like, there's got to be a separation. It's got to be a separation.
Of course.
I think
so now I know why Tim never replies.
Ever.
Ever. I hardly check it on. I do not check. Once my kids get home, I do not check my email.
For you, that's awesome.
Yeah, and I try to limit it on the weekends too, or else I don't want to be that person with their head in their phone all day. Ain't happening. Gotta have a work-life balance.
For sure.
So let's talk a little bit, Gary, about things that have transition, or the transition and some of the big events that have happened to VCPI.
Yeah, for sure. I think that I can recall one very specific event that I think transformed our organization. And ironically, it happened, a couple months before the pandemic, and it was our organization experiencing a ransomware attack. It was in November, I think, of 2019, and it obviously impacted us. It impacted, our clients, and I think that for us was a really pivotal moment where we decided at that point in time that oftentimes there was hesitation with not all of our clients, but with some, about changing things. People are scared of change. So it takes time, and in a lot of cases, it's taken years for us, because some of our clients have been with us for 10 or 15 years. It's been taken years for us to get them comfortable and familiar with changing things. And what do I mean by that? It's really moving away from the on-premise architecture, the old Microsoft best practice of shared environments, to a segregated environment. And with that, obviously there's barriers to that, because there's the time and effort for us to do it, and there's costs associated with that on the client side, and then there's the security component of that as well. So we looked at that as an opportunity to really spearhead our efforts to begin to segregate all of our clients. And really what that meant was, within the first 10 days, we migrated about 40,000 email boxes from on-premise Exchange over to 365. And, it's probably one of the largest scale migrations Microsoft has seen, especially from an MSP perspective. I know, large scale organizations will do migrations, but MSPs aren't usually migrating tens of thousands of mailboxes within days. So it was pretty astonishing what we were able to accomplish, and really kudos to our team, because we own and operate a data center in Milwaukee, and that's where we set up shop to really tackle the ransomware and also begin the restore efforts for our clients. And especially in our healthcare industry, what it meant was obviously getting email restored. It meant getting access to financial applications, and also meant critical health records and medical administration record systems. Those were really critical systems. So, when we looked at that restore effort, it was prioritized based on, health records and medication adherence are really critical. They're the highest priority. And then beyond that, it's financial. And then obviously we have a team that was working in tandem that was focused just on email. So we had, engineers tasked with these specific things, and we rebuilt our environment from scratch. And that was pretty amazing, because we have, over 100 clients, and some of these, have tens of thousands of users. So this effort went on. It was 24/7 for weeks on end until we got stuff restored. And I think it really taught us that we can't give folks the option around, things that we look at as security recommendations. So we've taken the stance of, taking really providing a means to an end for security, and making them aware that, these are things that are real concerns and we have to take action, versus giving them the option to take action. I think that's one of the pivotal things that our team learned in that whole process. And, at the end of the day, luckily we didn't have any breach of data or information, which was, really critical, and kudos to our team for making sure that we had an environment that was secure enough to not have that happen. and the team that worked around the clock to restore all those client systems. But it was definitely an experience, and it's really taught our team how to respond to anything that could be remotely similar. And, we followed our IRAMP plan, and now our team knows that to a T. So when we get a ticket that comes into our support team, that might be like phishing or something like that, or a potential compromise, or there's been a lot of stuff that's happened with like SolarWinds and some of those systems that, our team looks at those as opportunities where, we're in and patching that stuff within an hour. Typically in a lot of cases. With Microsoft Exchange issue that happened over like maybe a month or two ago, within 2 hours, we had patches on that stuff. We were running scans, and we take that stuff very seriously now. And, we look at it as VCPI being battle tested, because honestly, a lot of organizations haven't been through that. And it's easy from the outside looking in to say what you would do in that situation, but without actually going through it, you don't really know how you would handle it, especially when some of your systems are down.
Yeah, you've hit on one of the number one things that we talk about all the time is there's a lot of MSPs that just add another S to their name and think they're ready to take on the security burden, but don't have really any incident response plan. We're looking to outsource those incident response plans, and that's a difficult endeavor. And obviously massive scale that you just talked about there, bringing it back. And I'm sure there was a lot of exhausted people when that was over, but
of course,
there's also a lot of companies that wouldn't be able to come out of that, and that would be the death blow. So kudos to you and your team as well for carrying that forward.
I got a quick question. So Gary, so you said that in hindsight, you would have been a little bit more forceful in, making your clients understand that it's not an option, it's a requirement. But where would you, to other people who are going through this right now, where would you say the teeth is for them to do it? I mean, do you make them sign a waiver saying they're not going to do it? Do you dump them? Like what's the play there for these smaller MSPs that are about to go through the same thing that you guys had to go through?
Yeah, I think it's different. It's a little bit different for us just because we're operating within healthcare, and like things are oftentimes mission critical. And when we're looking at updating devices from Windows 7 to Windows 10, because that does still exist out in some of our client environments, one of the things that we've settled on is sunsetting. And looking at, sunsetting, whether it's operating systems, hardware devices, and giving our clients enough leeway where we tell them we'll support this best effort for a period of time, as long as we can put all the required patches, et cetera, on these systems or on these tool sets. And we look at that as our opportunity. And, that's become commonplace for us, where now we're getting to the point where we're just aligning with end of life or end of support based on the manufacturer of systems. So that makes that conversation a lot easier where, if a client does have a device that is Windows 7, we would just point blank say that we won't be able to support this. But we don't just say that. I think that part of it is the conversation and the communication to the client and giving them a route to be successful. And, what that might look like is going to be different for everyone. But I think that's a really important piece, is not just saying we're not going to support this, but it's talking about, we have some options for how we can do this in a low cost way, or if cost is a barrier, or we have partners that can help you procure, thousands of devices if you need to do a whole fleet. And it's just working through that and really being collaborative and being a partner with your clients. And I think honestly, that's where, some of our work with PCIO Toolbox has been really helpful, is we can start doing the planning for that and getting people familiar. And that's been really instrumental for us, is being able to really be thoughtful and plan out, what does the budget look like over the next 2 to 3 years?
Well, what it really does is an event like that, it puts you into a position where you can force a little bit more leadership than you may have been able to previously. And it also instills that with your team. They now understand the outcomes of not taking a more leadership position with the customers you're working with. Forget about the planning you can do with us. It's more that just that whole holistic approach of, hey, we're here to guide you and make things better for you. And if you're not listening to us or working against us, it's not about a money grab. It's about really making sure that you've got the things that you need so you can operate effectively the way you need to for your clients. And again, you're talking about critical clients. That, the medicine piece is the part that resonated most with me, because you think about the ages that are usually in those long-term acute cares and the medicines that are required just to keep,
of course,
through life going. You can imagine where that could be in a very scary moment when those systems are no longer accessible.
Sure. For sure.
It looks like we may have had a little technical difficulty with Rob on the call here.
So we're,
but I know we're getting near the end of our time together anyhow. Tim, I know you've got 5 questions that we go through very quickly at the end. I promise you, Gary, nothing here that'll get you in trouble.
Crazy. So look, Rob, just for everybody out there, Rob and I live about 40 minutes from each other. There's a string of thunderstorms coming through, little popcorn storms all over the place. So he is not on the good side of when the power goes out. They lose it all the time. So I'm guessing that's what it was. Yeah. Anyways, okay. So 5 questions real quick. First one is talk, text, or Teams?
Teams.
Teams. Okay. Music, movies, or TV?
Music.
Okay. Yeah, that's most of them. What age do you want to retire?
50.
All right. Mac or Windows?
Windows.
Windows. Yeah. If you could do anything outside of tech, what would it be?
Coach track and field.
Very cool. Beautiful.
Very cool.
50 just hurt me, Gary.
Yeah.
But anyway, so Gary, really appreciate you joining us today. This episode's going to be available anywhere that you get your podcast, so that we'll have that. We're going to put Gary's LinkedIn link right into that as well. So if you want to reach out to Gary and contact him, certainly feel free. Of course, Gary, so this episode will be up the Tuesday after next. So when you can look and plan for this as well. I think we're going to have you back in the not too distant future, because there was one topic we didn't get to cover today, and that's some of the automation work you're doing for other MSPs. And I think that could probably warrant an episode on its own as well, and see where some of that might make sense for many of our listeners. But appreciate you taking some time and joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you guys on the next episode. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks wherever you are. I hope you got some power.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.